So I've been wanting to do this for a while, and this is just kind of off of a script, off of an idea. And this is to put together a tier list of my favorite characters from A Realm Reborn. All the ones that I have met, all the ones who've made an impression on me, and basically work my way all the way from the top of the list. We have the best characters all the way down to the bottom, which we have who are the cleverly named, you'll see, the terrible ones. So let's go ahead and get into this. Right, so right out the gate, the first character who I'm going to talk about is Papalymo, Papa Meow. He is the only person who ends up getting just the full-on pass. For those of you who don't know, Papa Meow is like an absolute Giga Chad in my mind. He was the first character that I remembered playing from Final Fantasy XIV. I did try the game a couple years ago, but I only played it, I think, for like 3 or 4 hours, and then I moved on to something else. But I played as a Lancer through the Gridania storyline, and we met Yida, or Reverse Pants, and Papalymo. However, I only remembered Papalymo as Papa Meow, and that's kind of joke and stuck that he's, like, to me, he's the most important scion. If anything happens to him, I'm going to absolutely lose it. I don't know what's going to happen. I have no spoiler idea, but Papa Meow, top character, can't touch him, can't beat him. Moving on, we have Merlwyb Street, and I kind of torn between best character and pretty awesome. If I had to say, I would say that she's pretty awesome. I would put her higher. However, I didn't really feel like there was enough of an interaction to really build off of her as a character, or for me to have that like major play into. She does, and I thought about this, she does seem like the type of fun character that we could sit down and like have a bunch of shots together. Is basically what we would just go, like her and I would just sit down and go drinking. That's basically what I've taken from her storyline, of course, with the Maelstrom and everything. That was basically my thought of her throughout. Now she's very cool. She's very like controlled, and of course she runs like the pirate haven, so that makes sense. But I really liked her. I really thought she was pretty interesting. And she was pretty awesome from what I could tell. So I put her up there pretty high. All right, next we have Louis. We have Louisox. Now, Louisox we only saw just a little bit, and we saw him from the trailers, and we saw him, all that he could is basically what it is. All he could against Bahamut, and the Calamity, and thankfully we played through the coils of Bahamut, and we found out more about his story and his information. So I have to only put him really at interesting. I would even kind of put him as basic. And I hate to say that because I'm sure that there's a lot of lore and stuff that goes into him. But from what my experience of him was, it was basic. He almost felt like the general, we'll say the generic hero of of that event. Like sacrificed himself and all that. It felt kind of cliche. And again, I'm judging Louisox based off of 1.0 and all that. So I don't know necessarily how that that would play through. But I'd really just put him as basic. He was there for what he needed to do and essentially move the story along. I didn't really feel like there was that much interest. Like you could almost look at him and be like, yep, he's going to be the savior, the martyr, however you wish to put it. Then we have Briardien from the Hildibrand story, who is essentially the most sensible inspector compared to Hildibrand, which is the most wild inspector. I would say that Briardien, I would actually put him as interesting. And the reason that I put him as interesting is because he seems to be doing the consulting as an inspector out of the goodness of his heart, or just because he enjoys the thrill. Like he doesn't get any payments, he doesn't do anything like that, which leads me to wonder, why doesn't he do that? You think that if there was going to be an inspector or something that you were working on, that you would have like some type of gain, either monetization, fame, what have you. But there really wasn't too much more information based off of what we saw from the Hildibrand story, but at least enough to pique interest, which I think is cool. And I think he's deserving of the interesting list. Now let's talk about our Protein King, Cid. Now, I would argue that he's like the best character, or in the best character category, but I would actually just put him really into pretty awesome. He was pretty cool. It was interesting to see like his play with like the Gaius storyline, and then coming from the Garlean Empire, the Garlic Bread Empire, it was interesting enough to understand why he was there, who he was, and why he was doing this. And it was just the fact that this dude just came out and looks like Cid. I dubbed him Cid the Protein King, which, in all fairness, he was. This dude came out like he removed his cloak from the church, and he essentially became like this super jacked dude, which I thought was hilarious. Like, he just kind of came out and was just like, boom, look how big, you know. Oh, I couldn't remember who I was, but then he had like his engineering goggles on there, which also ironically hid that he was Garlean, by the way, which that may have been done on purpose. Livia. Now, we know exactly where Livia goes. Yeah, she's going straight to the bottom. I hated this lady with a passion. That's really what it boils down to. I absolutely hated this lady. Not only was she like, she worked as a good villain, but she just made you want to not like her. Especially what she did with our girl Noraxia, and Noraxia is on this list. She was absolutely one of those characters that I was stressed at. I did not like, and I was so happy that we got to fight and kill her. That made me happy. That was like one of the highlights of the A Realm Reborn to me, is just because she was just an utter B, and she got what she deserved. So yeah, down to the bottom, she got the the punk A category. That's what I dubbed it. But yeah, didn't like her, hated her. Then we have Ellie. So Ellie, again, is from the Hildibrand story, and the A Realm Reborn story, we find out that her and her twin sister are accomplices, and they're trying to bring about an apocalypse for Ulda. I would say that she's basic. I mean, she falls into the basic trope of like, oh, you know, the person who's overly involved into the story, who seems to be helping, ends up being the villain. It was kind of predictable, and actually after I thought about it for a while, especially following the Hildibrand story, I was like, yeah, that kind of makes sense, I suppose. Now, it was interesting to see that she had a twin sister, and and understand the history of Ulda and Silda, and how they interplayed with each other. But she was basic. She was a movement plot for the story. Like, she just helped things move along. So I can't necessarily say that she was just like, oh my goodness, the biggest bad, the best character in the game or anything like that. She's almost forgettable in that sense. But I would say that she's pretty basic. All right, so now we got Alphinaud, and now this I don't think this is the best picture, but we have Alphinaud. I would really like to put him as a punk. I really wanted to. But I'm going to actually put him into the interesting category. And the reason being is because when I initially met him, I hated him. I thought he was an absolute dweeb. And his like high and mighty, better than you kind of voice just ended up pissing me off anyway. So I will say that Alphinaud did gain my favor as we moved through A Realm Reborn. And he actually, especially once I got into the Coils of Bahamut, he became a lot more interesting. He became a lot more intriguing, understanding his history, and especially the interplay with Alisaie, who I will actually get here in a moment. I actually really ended up not hating him as much. But I'm sure that there's going to be more that we talk about as we go through the MSQ and get into Heavensward and all that stuff. So that's kind of my thought with him for right now. Now we have Y'shtola, or British Cat Lady. She was an integral part to our Limsa Lominsa storyline. However, honestly, in my opinion, I really just think that she was a means to an end. Like, yeah, we understand a little bit about her, but we didn't really see much of her personality aside from like the one or two interactions that she had right before the Titan fight, the Titan battle with Meryl Street. Now, I do think that she ends up getting fleshed out more, and we will understand her more as the game goes on. But as of right now, she just felt like, again, she was just moving the pieces along. And I know that that's going to probably piss some people off who really like Y'shtola, but for right now, she was just kind of, I didn't really have too much of an opinion on her. It's just she did what she needed to, and she facilitated me joining the Scions of the Seventh Dawn. I almost said Forgettable Dawn. Now, looking at Alisaie, I actually really liked Alisaie, given the little experience that I had with her. Unfortunately, she reminded me too much of Alphinaud for me to be like, where is she the coolest? Alisaie was in my mind, a trying to prove herself is really what it was. She was really trying to prove herself and prove like almost like worthy of her grandfather's admiration of Louisox by continuing on his quest and being almost as vindictive as him, or I shouldn't say vindictive, as just as him. Now, it was interesting, especially in the coils, to see the interaction between these two, Alisaie and Alphinaud, but what limited experience I actually had with her prevented her from climbing higher into the category. She was interesting enough that I would want to learn more, but as it stands, we didn't really see too much of her. Now, let's talk about Uber Danger, or Orangutan, or Boomerang. I've called him all these different names. Urianger is one of the scions of the Seventh Dawn. I actually really don't have too much information on him, and I'm sorry, but he was kind of forgettable in A Realm Reborn. Like, he didn't have any major parts that made me be like, whoa, that's so cool. Like, I think in the actual quest, aside from me doing the Coils of Bahamut, like, Urianger was only, like, he only had, like, 3 voice lines, or 3 lines, and that was it. And I didn't really feel like he was a major player, a major character in everything that was happening within that universe. Yeah, unfortunately, he had to fall down to the forgettable category. I hope that I get to see more from him and understand him a little bit better. But as of right now, it's just kind of like, yeah, I forgot about him. All right, now this is another one from the Hildibrand story, but this is also a big callback, which is Gilgamesh, or Greg, as he is dubbed. Greg was actually, I actually thought he was pretty awesome. Despite this being my first Final Fantasy XIV, or Final Fantasy game, I should say, we got to see quite a bit of who Gilgamesh was, who Greg was, and understand why he plays such a part in the Final Fantasy universe. But given that he was involved in the Final Fantasy XIV universe, it was still pretty interesting to see him and his interaction with Hildibrand, and it's almost kind of like a Tom and Jerry interaction, I feel like is the best way to put it. I really liked him. He added a bunch of humor. His trials were pretty interesting. They offered some complexity. It was good fun. All right, so moving on to Connie. Kan-E-Senna, I believe is her full name. She was is the leader of the Gridania, New Gridania, and all that. And of course is an integral part to the Gridania story, but I didn't really have too much interaction with her. She seemed very mom-ish, mom-like, mom Sana. I called her Connie. And she had an upside-down unicorn necklace. By that, go ahead and Google it. You think I'm wrong, but just trust me. Trust me on this. She was interesting enough for me to be curious about her story and like who she is, and maybe that's worth like an initial playthrough of getting up to like a Gridanian envoy. So like the first like 5-10 levels and all that. So I can understand her a little bit better. What we did see her do, especially towards the end of A Realm Reborn and essentially dealing with Gaius and his shenanigans, she had a lot more flavor to her character, a lot more flavor to her story. And it warrants me to be more interested rather than just being like, yeah, she's basic. She's pretty close to being basic, but I wouldn't say that she's necessarily too basic. There's enough draw there, let me put it that way. Now moving on to Yida, or Reverse Pants. I actually really liked Reverse Pants. I really did. I thought that she was kind of like a cool, we'll say quirky type character in comparison to Papalymo, who she worked hand in hand with in Gridania. She has a lot of, like, she's, in my mind, she's a bit mysterious. Like, why does she always wear the mask? Right? Like, we never really found out why she has a mask, but she does play a pretty good job as far as a pugilist within the A Realm Reborn story. We see her beat up some guys and do some fancy flips over Livia, but I thought she was pretty awesome. I'd like to see more of her. She's within the interesting, you know what, let's put her in interesting. I don't know enough that I would say that she's pretty awesome. And I think that's just maybe once I find out more of who she is and, you know, why she does what she does, I would probably push her up to like a pretty awesome character, not best character in my opinion. But move her up to pretty awesome. That's something that I could do. That's something that I think would be fair. But she had a couple of interactions with us, and she almost seems to be like this quirky kind of fun, outgoing character in contrast to Papa Meow's like more serious, we'll say, manner, which is that type of play is always fun. Now we got Thancred, the tanky boy. We really didn't see too much of him, and eventually, of course, we see that he gets taken over by Lahabrea, the Ascian, and yeah, that's something that does pop up. Honestly, I feel like he was a means to an end, honestly, so I'm putting him in the basic category. He was just there to facilitate and there to move forward. I wouldn't necessarily say that he's a bad character or forgettable, but he was one that it didn't seem like enough of a draw for me, in my opinion, for him to be considered interesting, or and he was there enough to have enough of a play, especially when we were trying to do the Ifrit storyline, that we actually even got to see how he, right after finishing the Battle of Ifrit, he jumps over some Amalja units and throws knives, and it's pretty cool. Like, so he does have this almost like thief, we'll say assassin vibe going with it. So that keeps him from being forgettable, but we didn't really have too much on him to understand why he would be interesting. And then poor Noraxia. I included Noraxia just because of how she played a role in the Science of the Seventh Dawn. Honestly, I hate to do my girl like this because I think in this image she's already dead, but she was kind of forgettable. She did move the story along, but honestly, by up until the time that we actually saw her again, I thought she was kind of forgettable. I really do. I didn't really pay much of attention to her. She essentially just got iced by Livia, so that was a thing. I didn't really see enough of her to be like, she's really, really cool. And yeah, so she could sit in her. She's giving Urianger company. That's what she's doing. All right, Big Daddy Gaius. I actually really liked him. I really thought he was pretty awesome. Because especially towards the end of Realm Reborn, we see that he was having some type of disparity, I should say, between him and Lahabrea, and how they go about it. And later did I find out that him and Nael Van Darnus, the Legatus, had a conflict. They talked and were like, I don't agree with what you're doing with Dalamud. So calling down this satellite to release Bahamut on everyone and essentially pull up the apocalypse was not something that he thought of. And if you saw how his soldiers interacted with him, there was a sense of like honor, almost trust with the rest of the Garlean soldiers, the rest of his team, the Tribuni, between Nero, Rhitahtyn, and Livia. There was this level of respect. So I thought he was pretty awesome. I thought that there was a lot of really cool, interesting aspects about him that really made him stand out as a villain, but it's almost, they did a villain right because they almost made you feel like, yeah, I could kind of agree with him. I could kind of agree with what he's saying. You know, there's certain aspects. I don't agree with how he's going about it, but I can understand his motive, I guess. And that's what gave me the pretty awesome. And of course, him going Super Saiyan with his sword and stuff like that. Like that was pretty cool. Julyan, which we only just met not too long ago in the Hildibrand story. The reason I wanted to put her on here is because she piqued my interest. She essentially she's Hildibrand's mother, and essentially is this, we'll say, like, she's on the tier of Hildibrand's father, if not higher, like, and essentially like a untouchable anime Super Saiyan god. But we didn't really get to see a lot of her story fleshed out, so I would put her as interesting because I wanted to find out more, especially because of the way that she handled the situation in the Hildibrand quest line and all the shenanigans there. She was interesting enough for me to be like, wow, that's pretty cool. You know, like, who the hell is she? Where did she come from? And where did she go, Cotton Eye Joe? It's basically one of those really interesting characters who we didn't really see enough, but I want to learn more, I guess is my way of putting it. All right, now we have Rhitahtyn. Rhitahtyn, I don't know. The double shield shotgun bro. I actually thought he was awesome. We didn't see hardly any of his story. We didn't get to understand who he was, why he was there, what he was doing, but we did see him in his fight, and he was an absolute blast. I have a certain level of respect for characters like this, where essentially they get taken down, but then they get up and they fight through the pain. And they're just like, I will not go out like this. And they're just resilient. You fought him through 3 iterations. The first time, kind of basic. Second time, he turns up the heat. Third time, it's like either you die or I die, which is such a cool way to go about a character in this game. And it's like almost a level of respect. Again, I would like to learn more about him. I'd like to see more of his story, but all in all, he was really, really cool. I really liked him. He was he was pretty awesome. Not a best character, but pretty awesome. All right, now we have Minfilia. Minfilia, the leader of the Scions of the Seventh Dawn. She is also one of the characters who has the Echo, in contrast to the Warrior of the Light. Personally, I really felt like she was kind of a basic character. She really was. She moved the plot along to a degree, which was important and all that, but again, she felt like it was just she was a way to move the story along without really making a massive impact. And then, of course, like, you know, she gets captured and we have to go and rescue her, and that's part of it. But I didn't really feel a super big tie when she got captured. It wasn't like when Papa Meow got captured, where I was like, oh my goodness, save my boy. Like, she was just there to kind of move things along. So she'll have to fall into the basic category, unfortunately. Now we have Godbert. Godbert is Hildibrand's dad, and he is an absolute Giga Chad, is the only way to put it. I'm putting him as a best character because every single time this guy showed up on screen, completely stole the show. Completely, like, the whole focus was on him. And I thought that was actually a really well done affect to Hildibrand, because Hildibrand's already wacky, and then it's like you see his dad and you're like, oh, that's where he got it from. But on top of that, he was just really engaging. Like a lot of the things that he did and just the animations that they put into him is that, like, he's unstoppable. He essentially could best the Warrior of Light on the Warrior of Light's best day. Like, that's how cool he was. But I will say that you don't see him as much, and he doesn't make as big of an impact. But when he was on screen, absolutely stole the show. Best character. He's in that category with Papa Meow. Now we have Lahabrea. Now Lahabrea is the essential villain. We'll say he possesses Thancred and forces him into doing Ascian deeds. I actually was interested in him, and the only reason I was interested in him was because the way that he manipulated Thancred. Apparently there's more lore to it, but the way that he manipulated Thancred and the way that he essentially supported the Garlean, we'll say the Garlean Inquisition, and progress the story, there was enough intrigue for me to want to know more about the Ascians and understand what their motives are and why they're doing what they're doing. Now, I did feel that he was against a basic plot element, but there was a lot of shadow around the Ascians and it seems like they're like an all-fearing, like people fear the Ascians. So I want to learn more about that as the story progresses. So he was interesting, to say the least. Up next, we have Biggs. Now, Biggs was the assistant to Cid Garlond in the Garlond Ironworks, or the Garlond Engineering Corps, however, it may have been Ironworks. And him and his compatriot Wedge were essentially there to assist Cid, and they had some of their own small plot points. I would say that he is basic, personally. And you know what, while I'm thinking about it, I'm probably just going to lump Wedge in there together. Essentially, they didn't really have enough elements in the story that really made me say, like, wow, that's so cool. Now, I will say that it was what keeps them from being forgettable is the fact that they not only are Star Wars references, Biggs and Wedge from A New Hope, I believe, they have this interaction between each other that is hilarious. And then when you actually hear their voices, like, it's like that is not what I thought either of their voices would sound like. But they moved the characters along, but they also could have fallen into the forgettable category. I like them here as basic because, yeah, that's basic. They assisted Cid in the moving of the plot line of the story, but didn't really make a massive impact in my mind. Now we have Raubahn and Sultana. Now I kind of put these two together because I actually only had limited interactions with them, but they're going straight to the interesting category. The interesting category for those two, because Raubahn is, of course, the leader of Ulda and the Immortal Flames and all those guys, and Sultana is I guess the basic version or the female version of the Sultan. It's kind of what I'm putting it at. Now, we don't really see too much of them. However, we find out quite a bit of, you know, like the situation in Ulda, as most of the A Realm Reborn story tends to be focused in and around Ulda. So we get a little bit more of the world fleshed out right there, but Raubahn and the Sultana interactions, the way that they operate is as far as like a chain of command. I thought that was pretty interesting. I thought that was an interesting way to have like a leadership where it isn't just like, oh, okay, well, you know, you have Kan-E over here, who's like the gentle, soft leader. You have Merlwyb, who's like the direct and straightforward. And then you have Raubahn, who's like the crazy, furious. That would be like the trifecta of like, oh, okay, those are stereotypical leaders. But him and the relationship between him and Sultana warrants me to be more interested in what they do and who they are. So that's how he fell into that category. Now we have the last member of the tribunus, which is Nero. Honestly, he's going straight to forgettable. Like, I don't know if that's fair. I would say he's basic. And the only reason that I would say Nero is basic is because, one, he has like some type of infatuation with Cid, and he always ended up being like in his shadow, essentially. But we had so little interactions between him, Livia, and Rhitahtyn. I'm going to say his name is Rhitahtyn. I always probably get that wrong. That I would need to know more. However, like, it just seemed like he was like, oh, you know, we find out that the last second, oh, I've always lived in his shadow. But it's like, we didn't know. We had no idea until the moment that we actually killed him, and then he disappeared. Which I don't think we actually got the kill. Like, the lights went off, and he was on his knees, which shouldn't be taken any other way other than that. And then we don't really have any more information on him. So I don't know what happened with him. I don't know what, if he actually truly died, but I feel that he is essentially just a plot device. Maybe they'll use him in the future. Maybe if he lived, he'll be in the future, or maybe he just died and everyone kind of forgot about him. Again, that's why he's like leaning towards forgettable. All right. Then we have Mommy Crystal, Aldynn. Now, Aldynn is essentially the source of your echo. She's essentially like the benevolent primal amongst these this world of primals. I would just say, honestly, she's basic. She does what she needs to, and she's also kind of like that overarching, like, you can't fail element in the game. You know, like, it would be a lot more serious if the Warrior Light had the opportunity of failing, but it's like, we get absolutely roasted by Lahabrea right after the Ultima Weapon fight, and Heidi saves us. And it's like, okay, because we knew that was going to happen. And it was like, it was a bit predictable, let me put it that way. Her story elements put into the game. She was a bit predictable in that sense. Not saying it's bad. Not saying that she's, you know, forgettable, but she's, you know, like, she's basic. Like, you have been blessed with this power, and now it's up to you to take it to the next level. And it's like, she saves you when she can. So I didn't really feel that she was like a massive character that I would be like, oh, wow, that's so awesome. You know, but she was a lot better than being forgettable. Now we have the next two are actually going to be tied to the Marauder questline. We have the Marauder Guild leader, which is Wyrnzoen. I know his name is Worm. Honestly, he was basic too. I really hate to lump him together in there. He had some kind of some intriguing elements that made me like kind of chuckle and laugh, especially when he's trying to prove who the, you know, if you're ready to join the ranks of the Marauder Guild. that was interesting, but it didn't necessarily provide me enough framework to be like, I really like him, or be more curious. He seemed to be just that plot point again, means to an end. Now, moving on to Curious Gorge, I actually thought Curious Gorge was pretty interesting, especially understanding the warrior questline and like how these, you're taming, quote unquote, the beast within you to be this furious warrior. It was really interesting to follow along the questline to understand his family's heritage, to end up fighting his brother who had gone mad with rage. Like, that was actually very well done. It was very interesting. It was something that I thoroughly loved. Now, I will say that I know that there's more warrior quest lines as the expansions go on, and that's something I'll have to follow up. Plan on doing a new main job in Heavensward. That's coming up soon. But the idea of it is that Curious George was pretty interesting and a lot more dynamic, rather than just being like, oh, go and visit this new class trader who knows more. And it's like, I paid my gold, and it's like, yay, we did it. It's like, it's less exciting that way. Now we got Hildy. Hildibrand is pretty awesome. So I was unsure of following the Hildibrand questline and doing all the stuff that is lied within there. I was told that it was a very important aspect of the game, so of course I went ahead and followed through, and I said, you know what, that's fine. I will say that Hildibrand was an interesting questline as a break, and I actually just recently put out a video talking about Hildibrand where I said, essentially, he is a necessary break after the trauma that the main scenario quest brings. The main scenario quest brings a lot of trauma. This is just a way to have a break, watch some fun things, eat some popcorn, and you don't have to pay attention in many regards. But it's less involved as you, as the Warrior of the Light, the main character. You're just a fly on the wall and you're watching, and his shenanigans are fun, and they're just, you know, all along the lines. It was pretty good. Now we have Nashu, his loving assistant. I actually thought she was one of the best characters. There was a lot of times where she ended up stealing the show just in and of herself, just on her own, and either between her antics, her animations, all these little small things that she ended up doing, which ended up adding a capstone to the hilarity. Between her and Hildibrand, the way that they play in their interaction is that she's the ever loyal assistant, or ever loyal assistant, and she almost double downs on Hildibrand's shenanigans as like the excited, peppy kind of Watson to his Sherlock Holmes. Now, I will say that a lot of the times she didn't really take the spotlight, but there was more so her just being her own shenanigans over on the side that you just have to pay attention to and watch, and then you would see these things happen and you'd be like, oh, okay, that's pretty funny. All right, that's pretty cool. There was a lot of times that I felt like she was just involved in that regard. Now we have Haurchefant Bro. He was a part of the Korthos questline when we were trying to get Cid's airship. Now, a lot of people were like, oh, you got to go and talk to him. He's so cool. Personally, I kind of forgot about him. I really hate to say it, but he didn't really make that big of an impression on me. You know, like, I want to say that he has a bigger part to play in the game, but from what I've seen, it's just like, you know, I only saw him for, you know, like 3 quests, and we talked a little bit, and that was about it. A lot of players have been like, oh my gosh, he's my favorite character. I haven't seen it yet, and I'm sure that I eventually will. But from what I could tell in Korthos, he was pretty forgettable. I actually forgot about him until I was like reviewing the characters that I wanted to talk about in this list. So again, I know that this is probably going to piss someone off, but he was kind of forgettable in A Realm Reborn, basically. Now we have Nael Van Darnus. Now, Nael Van Darnus, we get to see in the Coils of Bahamut, and if you did 1.0, 1.0, she was the main villain. She essentially was trying to call down Dalamud, which was the space station prison for Bahamut, to call down Dalamud onto the Earth or Eorzea, and cause Bahamut to just rage and destroy everything. She was actually pretty awesome. I will give her the credit where credit is due. I was thoroughly interested in her story as I was playing through Coils of Bahamut. And after talking to Galactic and figuring out a little bit more, she was really a character that I felt was intriguing, but also like intriguing, but also kind of like psychotic. Like, she wasn't on the same level as Gaius, where it's like Gaius, I kind of agreed with like what he was saying. She was just crazy, but it was like in the best way of villainy, where it's like she's crazy, but it's that calm, cool, collected crazy, where it's like, it's almost, there's like a silent intensity about her, which I really, really liked. I thought that was interesting. That was something, she popped up and I was like, yeah, that's pretty cool. And lastly, we have Maggie. Guess where she's going? Straight to the best character. I had to read up on what Maggie did and who Maggie was, essentially, because they cut some of the stuff from A Realm Reborn, but Maggie is the sentient Reaper class, I believe, Magitech cruiser. There's probably a better name for her. But she was very, very cool. You get her as a mount, so she's constantly remembered in my mind. But yeah, she basically saves the day like 4 times, and she is without a doubt one of the most crucial parts of the Realm Reborn story, not only for the Warrior of the Light, like saving the Warrior of Light, but she essentially moves the plot along. So she does everything that you need to in a character, but then also provides kind of like that solemn sacrifice. So of course, at the, she sacrifices herself to gain entry to Nero's vault, where you have to fight him. That was pretty cool. Then she comes back and she ends up saving you while you carry Thancred out of all the explosions. Well done. Ironically, looking at this entire list now, I love how Livia is a punk ass. Like, all the other villains, I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. Livia, nah, I just absolutely hated her. Absolutely hated her. The forgettable category, yeah. The basic category, I felt, again, nothing notable there. The interesting category, they caused me to ask questions and want to learn more. Pretty awesome. Self-explanatory. Best characters, Papa Meow, Godbert, Nashu, and Maggie. Can't beat them. That's it. Now, if you guys are interested and you want to see essentially my entire playthrough of A Realm Reborn, I've documented the whole journey. I've isolated it to one video. It's a long one, so you can bookmark it and take it piece by piece. That is linked right here. Go ahead and take a view if you are interested. Aside from that, ladies and gentlemen, stay caffeinated, folks.